I'm feeling it. I am feeling it.
So, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who scored only 4 Rouges all last season, Jack.
The Stampeders are over the hump and back on top. 2018 Grey Cup champions.
Yeah, man, I eat chalk for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Here's a 50 to the 40, down near the 20. He's gonna score! Touchdown! A chance to win! Will they get it? Yes, they will! Unbelievable! Holy goodness!
Whew! Muy caliente.
Welcome back for episode 2 of the Red, White, and the Rouge CFL DFS podcast. If you're wondering why Rob and I didn't do the Eastern preview, unfortunately, I was attacked by my own gallbladder. So, I know, right? Like, what an asshole. So anyway, I had to go get that taken out, and that was just a long process. So thankfully, we didn't miss a week of DFS action, and honestly, you guys didn't miss out on a whole lot listening to us talk about the East. The East is just a real fucking mess this year, and that's Hamilton's conference to lose at this point, and Montreal's to just not come last in.
Yep.
Before we get started, give Rob and I a follow on Twitter. My Twitter is now John Hewish with the underscore. Not as clean as I'd like. And Rob's is, as usual, Rob McSports. And we do have a podcast for the Twitter as well. It is RWN The Rouge podcast, so go give that a follow. We'll try to tweet out there as much as we can just to not spam our other profiles with it. But if we're being honest, we're still going to spam this pretty hard.
It's
podcast,
more so...
Yeah.
It's more for about news about the podcast. Like, we'll tell you when it will be coming out, more or less. And I will live tweet the game when I've had a few beers and I'm watching it live. That kind of stuff.
That's always
fun
more
stuff.
Exciting.
Yeah.
This should also be available for you guys on SoundCloud and YouTube now. Still working on iTunes. Hopefully we'll have it up for week 2, because I know that's where I'll let you guys listen to it. Stitcher as well is a pretty popular platform that we're going to try to get this up on to make it more accessible, so you don't have to, it's just easier to access. So before we talk about the DFS side of things, if you guys want, if you are just here for the DFS side of things, there are timestamps down below, but Rob has put together a wonderful CFL 2.0 update for us, so just really leaning into Montreal. So why don't you just go ahead and just have at it.
Well, before we begin, I'd like to say a little prayer to Randy Ambrosi, our great leader and founder of CFL 2.0, and the wonderfulness of what he has done. A little acknowledgement for him. Anyway, so after preseason, we've learned a lot about CFL 2.0 and the CFL's new global strategy. And I've given it a ton of shit. Last week, I made fun of it. But we've actually seen a few gems come out of it. Every team now gets a global player spot on their roster, just like they have a set number of Canadians they can have and a set number of Americans. And but the actual results of these drafts is kind of surprising. So of the Mexicans taken in the Mexican draft, 5 of them, including 2 receivers, 2 kickers, and a linebacker, have actually made starting night rosters, which is actually kind of impressive. I didn't expect many of them to. And almost all of the players who were selected in the draft actually made practice rosters. Once again, something I didn't expect. And almost more surprisingly than the Mexican players making it is we actually had 4 Europeans making the team, including 2 Germans, such as Zimmerman with Saskatchewan, who I mentioned last week, a French linebacker named Maxime Royer, I'm sure I'm butchering that, and my favorite, a receiver from Finland named Kimi Liniama. I'm, once again, completely destroying that. I know a little bit of Finnish pronunciation from hockey, but that's about it. And yeah, so it'll be interesting how these guys do. They actually made the starting roster. I didn't even expect them to make the practice roster, so we'll see how that story progresses, and I will definitely keep you posted if anything interesting happens. So apart from that, the most interesting thing to happen this week is the ongoing tire fire that is the Montreal Alouettes. So Montreal is a fucking mess, and there's no way to go around it. Last year they trade a bevy of picks and Chris Williams for the rights to Joni Menzel, trades that to the Ticats, and only like 6 months later he goes against his contract in order to go to the AAF. So right there, they've lost Johnny Manziel. They've lost who's supposed to be their starting quarterback going into next year. And not only do they lose him as a starting quarterback, they lose him as a means to sell tickets. And that's the most important thing in Montreal and in the CFL in general. On top of that, the team owner, Bob Wettenhall, or should I say ex-team owner, has been trying to sell the team for months now. And we've seen this before. CFL teams are normally a slow sell. However, Bob Wettenhall actually sold the team to the CFL. So now this is a league-run team, which is what we all wish would happen with the Phoenix Coyotes and other sports teams that just don't hold up in their market. So this is a big deal. Go on top of that, attendance is dropping, all that kind of stuff. And to make things even worse, after an off-season of pure disappointment, after the second preseason game, Montreal coach Mike Sherman stepped down due to a struggle transitioning to the CFL system, which is something you see with players all the time, but not with coaches. So after training camp, after their preseason games, after cuts, they fire their coach, or the coach steps down. So now we have GM Kavis Reed replacing the coach with offensive coordinator Kahari Jones, which is a smart move because you don't want to bring someone in that late. But it is a mess. We have no idea what this team is going to be. It wasn't going to be good anyway, but now it's going to be even worse. It's quite frankly a sad story. Just a few years ago, this team was a perennial contender. They had Anthony Calvillo. If you go far enough back, you look at Ben Cahoon. What a mess. I have no idea what the league is going to do, and it's even worse considering that they're expanding. They're expanding into different markets, and if they can't hold on to cities like Montreal and these urban places, how are they going to keep growing the league? It's a mess. Anyway, now we'll get back onto the DFS side, and we can all laugh at Montreal a little bit.
Okay, wait. I just want to clarify something first. You mentioned that the CFL's gets a global player position. Now, is that they added one more to the roster, or they just made it so it didn't count towards your international players from the U.S.? It's basically U.S. players. They say international, but all the players they bring in that are international, I'm doing air quotes, are from the United States.
Yeah, so now what it is I believe they got an extra player to their roster.
Okay, that's why they hung on to so many of them then.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
okay.
You've got Canadians, Americans, which they call international, and then they have global, which is Mexico, Europe, all that kind of stuff. Because international and global are very different.
They're extremely different. Yeah. All right, let's jump into the DFS side of things, starting with the first game of the weekend that goes Thursday evening at 4 Pacific now, because they bumped ahead the start time due to the NBA Finals. So we're going to start off the season at 7 Eastern on Thursday with Saskatchewan at Hamilton. Hamilton are 2.5-point favorites, and the total in this one is the lowest on the week at 48. Do we see the biggest fade of the season in week 1 with Zach Collaros?
I think we have to. I don't see any other option.
It's week 1 and we're already fading Zach Collaros. Just perma-fade.
Well, when it comes down to it, his value is only 7,500. That's like, I feel DraftKings is fading him as well. Like, that's awful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no. Mazzoli at 11,000. I mean, no, the no-brainer play if you're paying over 11,000 is Riley, and I shouldn't need to repeat that. Running backs, William Powell's the only guy I'm really at all interested in. Hamilton did give up 17 rushing touchdowns last season, about over 100 yards rushing per game, which is about middle of the pack, honestly, and he has the upside, but again, if you're paying in that price range, it makes sense to really go a different direction. Wide receivers, anybody in the wideout situation sticking out to you here?
Yeah, first of all, I'm a little bit concerned about the Ticats receiving situation. We don't exactly know if Tasker is playing or.
I think they're both.
They're
questionable tag, but they're both expected to play, I believe.
They're both expected to play. Okay, well, either way, if they don't play, Mike Smith is a really good option. And Braylon Addison is also a good option if either of them don't play. Either way, Jeremiah Mazzoli's a good quarterback. He's going to throw a lot of passes. He's going to get a lot of yards. So basically, anyone is fair game. In terms of Saskatchewan, I think one of the better plays of this week is Shaq Evans at only 5,300, especially considering he led the Riders in receiving yards last year. Obviously, it wasn't a banner year for Saskatchewan receivers, but at the same time, he's a 28-year-old who had a pretty significant NFL cup of coffee. So I think he's a really good play at 5,300.
Yeah, I agree, especially with Arsenault expected to sit this one out. You can go for him, Kyron Moore, Naaman Roosevelt. I think Roosevelt, obviously, we're expecting kind of, hopefully, to see him bounce back, honestly, after what happened last season. He had a really down year, so I like me some Naaman Roosevelt for GPPs if we get Arsenault confirmed out. As for defense and special teams, with this game having the lowest total in the week, it's hard to ignore either of them, especially at 43 and 4,100 respectively. Ticats at 4,300. Caleros is probably going to throw a pick or two. Their defense isn't amazing, but they'll just kind of, again, stumble into those points, maybe get a defensive touchdown. As for the Riders, again, like, this team was so good on defense and special teams last season. At 4,100, it's hard not to like their upside, even against not the best matchup with Mazzoli. Like, obviously he's a good quarterback, but like 4,100, that's so cheap for Saskatchewan. I don't think there's many matchups coming this season where we see them priced this low. So, but I'm fine with either or here, honestly. Not really looking.
Just to add to that, with Christian Jones doing kick returns still for the Riders, there's a solid chance of a kick return or punt return touchdown as well, which is something to consider for the Riders. So I agree, low price, high upside play.
For sure. All right, let's move into game 2 then. Flying right along here. Montreal at Edmonton. Edmonton are 10-point favorites in this game, and the total in this one is 51.5. Trevor Harris is only 9,800 against a team that allowed 29 passing touchdowns last season and over 300 yards per game, which was the worst in the league. At under 10,000, you kind of got to love him here, right?
No, he's a very good play at under 10K. That being said, can Montreal be as bad as they were last year against the pass? That would boggle the mind. It's almost unbelievable. I agree, he's a very smart play if you don't want to pay for Mike Riley, but I can't imagine Montreal is worse this year against the pass.
I think they'll in my opinion, they'll find a way. Team will find a way. It
wouldn't surprise me, but like, oh my god.
Yeah. Flip side of that, Antonio Pipkin. He's only 7,100, and this game has a high spread and a high total, which means he'll likely be throwing the ball or at least trying to score deep into the game. He has rushing touchdown upside. He was better, at least, towards the end of last season. And at 7,100, that's like, if I'm picking between Pipkin, Caleros, and Matt Nichols, it's Pipkin 100 times out of 100. And at that price, it just really opens up to pay up elsewhere, in my opinion.
No, that's a very good take. Absolutely, if you're choosing between those three, Antonio Pipkin is the play there. The fact he can get it done with his legs so well, and the fact that he outplayed Johnny Manziel last year, or John Manziel, was it shows that he's a capable quarterback.
Agreed. Moving into running backs now, the only one I'm looking at here, I don't even want to talk about CJ Gable. I'm not going to talk about him because I'm not playing him in DFS this week. He's almost like 8K, and there's no merit for him to be priced that high, so we can just move right past him to William Stanback. Had an impressive finish to last season, and despite the Alouettes signing Jeremiah Johnson, it looks like Stanback is going to be the bell cow back in Montreal this season. Edmonton did allow the most rushing touchdowns last season and almost 110 yards per game. 5,600. I like that upside for Stanback. I don't think they feed Johnson too many touches here. I think they're going to try build up Stanback. He's only 24 years old. Jeremiah Johnson's 32, 33 now. Like he is there for moral support mostly. Honestly, to be like a mentor for this kid that they're going to try turn into a franchise player down the line if they can somehow turn this dumpster fire around. But yeah, I like Stanback at 5,600 this week.
Yeah, I think it's a smart play as well. Actually, I just to go back to the previous game with the Ticats, I actually feel very similarly about Sean Thomas Erlington for the Ticats. He's only 4,800 this week, and he's going in as the Ticats starting running back this year. Something I don't think anyone saw coming. But if you want to, I feel like this is the week to grab a young starting running back early at a low price and maybe splurge a little on receivers.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's really nobody else back there anymore. I mean, we know how Hamilton usually does use the run in that offense, but if under 5K, he's certainly worth a look as well. Moving into wideouts in the Edmonton game, however, your boy Greg Ellingson, 8,500. You think him and Trevor Harris are going to have that same mojo that they did in Ottawa?
I think so. The only way it doesn't happen is Brad Sinopoli is a god who is like somehow keeping DBs away from Greg Ellingson. However, if I had to choose between the two, I would choose Ellingson anyway. So I think him and Harris will put up points. He's so good. He's so fast. He's just good at getting open downfield, and he's pretty tall. So overall, I don't think you can go wrong with Ellingson.
For sure. DeVaris Daniels at 8,100. He's obviously the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Likely to play. If he doesn't, I'll just say Ricky Collins Jr. or Kenny Stafford are the guys you want to look at, but you're probably not going to need to look at them. On the Montreal side of the ball, if you're looking at somebody to pair with Pipkin, I like Devere Posey. He has massive upside. Like, he's good. And 5,300, like he could come in and easily be the wide receiver 1 on this team. If you're looking for a safer option, though, Geno Lewis. I think he built a strong rapport with Pipkin towards the end of the season, and he's definitely they feel like they've been working on that in the offseason. He might be Pipkin's guy. Like, until if Posey can't prove himself right away, Pipkin's going to lean on the guy who he has the experience with, and that's Geno Lewis. So. Don't sleep on Geno either.
I totally agree. I think Posey and Lewis are both really smart plays. If Montreal wants to be good this year offensively, one of those two guys has to have a really good season, without a doubt. Like, they can't have a wide receiver position by committee again this year. So one of these guys has to kind of show he's a star. Posey has showed that, so it wouldn't shock me if he just comes out swinging this year.
Agreed. Edmonton defense. I'm off them, but you're interested?
I'm interested because I think, as much as I think Pipkin is a really nice sneaky play, as someone who plays sneaky plays an awful lot, I love that. However, I just don't see Montreal putting up a ton with their offensive coordinator all of a sudden being their head coach. I think that it takes a while to build this kind of rapport with players, and they've probably switched around their entire system. So I'm not sure I trust their offense this week. So I have Edmonton.
All right. Jumping into the third game of the week, Ottawa is going to be at Calgary. Calgary are 6.5 point favorites. 7.5 actually. I wish it was 6.5. Even 7.5 seems a bit low, and the total in this one is 52. Quarterback situation. Bo Levi Mitchell, 10,400. He is like the Ben Affleck of the CFL. Very rarely will he wow you, but also very rarely will he disappoint you. Just
it's fair.
Safe, predictable, going to be in those mid-teen points, maybe get you close to 20, but not, usually not a ton of upside. So if that's what you're looking for, honestly, in cash games, like, he might be the guy to go with. If you can't really pay up for Riley, you don't trust Trevor Harris because his floor is like 2, then honestly BLM might be your guy.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to break it down. He's the middle ground between Harris and those guys. Personally, though, if you wanna, I would personally take Mazzoli ahead of Bo Levi. People say Bo Levi's the best quarterback in the CFL or the second best quarterback. I think he's third now. I think Mazzoli showed us last year that when it comes to arm and ability to read the game, he's the better quarterback. Bo Levi plays on a much better team. No question, and he has a better running back supporting him. However, I think if you're just going straight passing yards, I'd rather have Mazzoli or Riley or Harris.
All right. No need to talk about Dominique Davis. Running back situation, any interest for you in Don Jackson or Moses Madu?
I always like Don Jackson just because he's a very versatile back, multidimensional. He's able to cut up the field as a running back. He can get outside, and he receives passes an awful lot. And in a fantasy setting, obviously every time you get a reception, you score points, and Don Jackson's really good at that. So I'm expecting him to have a good week. And at 6,400, I think that's reasonable. I wouldn't say it's cheap by any means, but it's not too bad.
No, I mean, he's going to be one of the only people getting 15 to 20 touches in that price range. Average 17 against Ottawa in their 3 meetings last season. So, like, shit, if I could... I'm definitely going to have exposure to him, but, like, this is a really solid play as well.
Yeah, I like him as a pick, definitely.
As far as Moses Madu, Calgary did have the best run D in the league last year. I don't expect them to all of a sudden, turn into, like, Edmonton's run D. But he's the only guy in that backfield. He has pass catching upside as well. William Powell's out of the picture. Like, they're kind of giving him the keys to the car here. 5,300, I kind of want to see where he goes with that in his first game.
I really did think about Moses Madu. He's a good player. I could see him playing really well. And the Calgary defense isn't as good as it was last year. They've lost some pieces, but they've lost their starting middle linebacker, Singleton, who was an absolute tank. So, they might have a little bit of trouble adjusting to their run game, and Moses Madu is a very capable running back.
Agreed. Wideout situation for me, it's I only have eyes for Eric Rogers here. 7,900. I mean, he's the top target. Kamar Jordan still isn't back from his injury. You can pair him with Bo Levi. You can run him naked, but he's very solid option to pay up for, because like Bo Levi, he's safe. Not much else to it.
Yeah.
Are you going to be paying 5,100 for Calgary's defense?
I will not be paying 5,100 for Calgary's defense, because I feel like that score is almost more based on last year than it is this year. They've had significant turnover on their defense. It's still going to be a very good defense, but it's definitely not a $5,100 defense. They lost the best middle linebacker in the CFL. Yeah. Like, you can't just lose that and then say you're still as good as you were.
For sure.
Yeah. It's just not doable. I think that they're probably still one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the league, but I need a week or so to tell you if this defense is anywhere near where it was last year.
Winnipeg at BC to open up the season here. You and I will be in attendance, as of course. I'm taking the old man. It's a Father's Day gift, and you're at basically every home game, unless Shannon beats you out again.
Season tickets. No. I said no for this one because they're giving out Mike Riley bobbleheads. I'm not missing that.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to get there early now to fight for one too.
Yeah, I'm gonna get there early.
So yeah, if any of you guys that are listening are there, we can do like a little halftime meetup. That'd be so funny. I'd honestly think that's so funny. Please, like, actually, if you're gonna be there, tweet me. And we'll talk some CFL if you guys are, for whatever reason, in the BC Place area. But the Lions are 3-point favorites in Mike Riley's home debut. Total of 52 in this one. First game in the, I guess it's going to be the orange and white this year. Is he going to put up?
Well, yeah. The Lions have really, the Lions have completely redone their receiving core and surrounded him with very good veteran receivers. They've got, they've got a pretty good O-line, and they made it better this year with Sung Chu. I can never pronounce his name. Let's just move on, and a few other players, and that's going to be really interesting. So I think Riley's a for sure, and the fact he can do shortage and he can run with the ball, why would you not?
For sure. No need to talk about Matt Nichols. No.
I don't know. I feel like Matt Nichols is an okay play here, just because this is less
game
based
manager.
On numbers, but more based. Well, yes, game manager. You're absolutely right. However, at the preseason game last week, the Lions secondary was easily the worst part of their defense. They've lost a few really good guys in their secondary. Obviously, they lost Solomon Elamimian at linebacker, which doesn't directly affect the passing game, but it means everyone's had to shift around a little bit. So when it comes down to it, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. That being said, I don't know who the dominant force is. I'd say it's more likely it's going to be Andrew Harris than Matt Nichols, but I could see Matt Nichols having a good game, for sure.
speaking of Andrew Harris, this is like his homecoming. You know, he's
Yes.
BC boy, used to be here, and he played his ball into Nanaimo. So this is like, you know, this is as close as we're gonna get probably to a homecoming narrative for Andrew Harris, who, you know, I think he was born actually in Winnipeg, ironically, but obviously he considers himself more of a BC boy, and he always puts up when he's here. He always does well playing in Vancouver. Like he shows up for these games, and
He does.
I honestly don't see Saturday being an exception to that. And you know, this is very on brand for me, but lock in Andrew Harris. Shocker.
No, no, it's a good play, and John's absolutely right. He is good at home. He is good against BC when BC is at home. I feel like he does get a little bit of that revenge narrative. He was let go as a free agent. He wasn't even traded, so you know, I feel like players don't like that, understandably.
For sure.
Yeah. As for the Lions running backs, it seems that it's going to be a tandem. It's going to be John White and Rutley, kind of going back and forth, with White getting the no pun intended, the lion's share of the carries. But you know, I don't like splitting running backs, so I wouldn't pick any of these guys this week.
Wide receivers. I see you have Rashawn in all caps, bold, underlined here. So surely you're playing him at only 3,000, right?
I will not be playing him simply for the reason I don't know if they're gonna dress him after he was cut by Winnipeg last week. For those of you who don't know, he was cut by Winnipeg in the preseason in exchange, kind of in order to give Peterman a bigger opportunity, as he's also a Canadian receiver, and the Lions quickly snagged him up. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets any playtime here. The Lions receiving core is already very good, so I'm not sure how much he's going to get. There's a chance he could kind of sneak into that second wideout spot instead of Javon Katoy, who made the team out of camp. But yeah, it might be a few weeks before we see him getting any significant time. Okay,
that's enough for Sean talk.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it.
More seriously, Brian Burnham or Jerron Carter, do either of them, you know, tickle your fancy at all?
Both of them significantly tickle my fantasy. Jerron Carter, I watched him play last week. He's just a natural athlete. He doesn't look like one, but when he moves and stuff, he's a step above. He's very fast. He's very athletic. However, one thing I noticed last week is Brian Burnham and Mike Riley have a good thing going. They were very in tune, and I know it was only preseason, but as Burnham is very good as a deep option, and Riley is an amazing deep throw quarterback, I could see those guys hitting 70-yard touchdowns several times this year. So, and potentially being the new Darrell Walker. That's my hot take.
No, this is a very hot take. Probably not interested. No, you're not interested in either defense, and I know why. But we'll get to that in a second. But that's it for the 4-game breakdown. As usual, we have our 3 segments for you guys, starting with mine and Rob's head-to-head picks. So how that works is we'll both put out a lineup. It's 2 days before the first game of the slate. Obviously, Rob and I are going to make changes before then. We are going to play other lineups, but like this is, you know, it's a good way to start the week, honestly, to start with like a first build. And of course, these are our head-to-head lineups as well, so we're going to keep the record of these. So you guys get the benefit of listening to them. We're not going to tweet them out. Those Twitter scrubs that don't bother listening to the pod, they get none of this. So
yeah, this is exclusive content.
Exactly. Right after that, we're going to do the Price is Right play as we did, and then we'll finish it up with Lock of the Week. So, Rob, get us started with the
McPicks.
All right, so at quarterback, I have Mike Riley just because I think he's a great quarterback, and I think he's going to put up this week. At running back, I have Don Jackson because I really do like him as a receiving threat as well as a running threat. I have Brian Burnham kind of to pair with Mike Riley there, like a fine wine and cheese duo. I have Greg Ellingson as well, as I think him and Harris will just keep going from where they left off last year. As my first flex, I have Shaq Evans, who at 5,300 is a deal. And as my other flex, I have Sean Thomas Erlington, because I think that 4,800 is the cheapest we're going to be able to get him all year. I could be completely wrong about that, but he's the starting running back in Hamilton until further noticed. And then for defense, I have the Eskimos because I think Montreal's in shambles.
Good way to put it. All right,
Yeah.
Jumping into the Trevor Harris. I'm going to put him in at quarterback. 9,800. That's just too cheap for me to pass up, honestly. To follow that up, Andrew Harris, 8,600, of course, as my running back 1. I'm going to pair Greg Ellingson with Trevor Harris in their first game in the green and gold. Moving down, I got Eric Rogers again. Very, very safe option. My 2 flexes, not as safe. Right now, I got William Stanback and Moses Madu in there. If I'm being honest, in my head right now, I'm trying to think of ways to fit Don Jackson into this lineup, which might involve downgrading Eric Rogers. But for the sake of the pod and record keeping, we're gonna keep the lineup as is. So you guys don't have to sit here and listen while I tinker, because that could end up being a very long time. And Saskatchewan at defense, because I just think they're too cheap to pass up, and that really opens up salary elsewhere when I'm trying to fit guys like Andrew Harris, Ellingson, and now Don Jackson all into the same lineup. So that should be interesting. Moving on to our next segment, which is the Price is Right. Who you got coming on down this week?
All right, Shaq Evans, come on down. Last year, Shaq Evans led the Riders in receiving yards and is only $5,300 this week. What are they thinking? That is a very good price. And it'll be interesting to see how he does.
All right, this week I'm going to invite Antonio Pipkin. Come on down at 7,200. I think he can put up a big game here against the Edmonton Eskimos. Really like this price for him. He could go for 20 plus, and I don't think I'd be too shocked by that.
It's the Strevler play of this year. It's like last year when I picked Strevler. I almost wish I had done that.
He is the Chris Strevler of this year, but there's nobody coming back to take his job. There's nobody.
No. Yeah.
All right, time for the
Lock of the week.
Rob. No, I'll go first on Lock of the Week. No hot takes here. Under 52 in Calgary, Ottawa is my favorite pick. If you can find a way to parlay that with Calgary minus 7.5, I like that. Also, my DFS lock of the week, it's got to be Andrew Harris. And that's not creative of me to start the season with Andrew Harris as my lock of the week, but I think he really shows up when he plays in BC, and I don't think that's suddenly going to change week 1, especially when he's as fresh as he is coming off the off season.
I think that's a good play. I'm going to be as creative with my player lock of the week with Mike Riley, almost as exciting. This is his debut. He's going to want to show the fans at home that he is worth every penny they have spent on him. It's going to be a big game for him, and I think he's going to show up. In terms of my gambling lock of the week, which I will definitely be playing because I think this is a for sure. I'm going to take the over on the Lions Winnipeg game. Both of these defenses aren't fantastic, and Mike Riley alone could easily put up 30 points. And I can tell you that the Lions defense is not going to hold Winnipeg under 20.
I have a question for you about Mike Riley, and I actually want to hear your take on this.
Absolutely.
With John White being back on the same team as him in this BC offense, do you think we see him getting less goal line carries? Because as we talked about before, a big part of where his value comes from is the fact that he got so many of those just 1 yard rushing kind of punch it in touchdowns last season. Is that how they're going to use him here in BC too? I don't know. I honestly think that could affect. Personally, I don't think they're going to do that. I think that could affect his value, but I'll let you say your piece on that.
I actually thought something very similar until I watched last week when in a preseason game they did a goal line run with him in a game that meant nothing. So I think this is just part of who he is as a player. I think he's a competitor like that, and in many cases he's calling his own plays. So he'll just call his own number and go.
Hey man. Anytime BC faces Calgary, that is not a nothing game.
Well, that was.
Pretty close to another game.
The fun fact about that game, the lines were horrible until they were good in the first, then they took Riley out. Their backup quarterback, who has since been cut, played horribly, and they brought in this guy, his last name is Kramer, as their third string quarterback from a university I had never heard of, Drake University, and holy crap was he good. He was fantastic. He put together something like a 72-yard drive to win the game. Just fantastic. That's the type of stuff you love to see. And what's even scarier than that is he's my age, and I'm doing nothing with my life. So, yeah.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive.
All right, guys, that is it for the Week 1 episode. If you have questions for Rob and I, you know where to reach us on Twitter, at JohnHewish_ or at Rob McSports. Go be sure to follow the podcast on Twitter, on SoundCloud, subscribe on YouTube if that's where you like to listen. Hopefully we will have iTunes up for you guys by next week. Till then, best of luck in Week 1. Go take advantage of that overlay on DraftKings, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.